New edition of Education is the Best Medicine. Had some technicals. Always have technicals. So I don't know what's going on. We're gonna work on that. I want to thank you for listening, waiting. And we were supposed to start at 2 o'clock, but unfortunately we were a little late and had my mask on and all that kind of stuff. So I had to deal with that. Wanted to say thank you everyone for watching the show. And for tuning in. We've got a new website, and I'm real happy about it. It's http and two little dots and slash www.educationisthebestmedicine.com. You got to put that beginning part in. It's a great website. I'm really excited about it. Miss Howard is previewed, and it's pretty good. I'm gonna start writing in it, and I'm just excited about it. This is the Medicine Hour. I want to thank you for tuning in. This is supported by the Eyes of the Conscious Soul, Miss Barbara Howard, and her nonprofit. Appreciate it. Few interesting things going on. Today's February the 8th, and happy Easter. Medicine, and I think it's been an interesting week. I was doing some recent review of some Comcast image makers, and very focused on community. And one of the discussions around community is the equality index. And so, what's the equality index? It's a discussion about parity as in comparison to white folks. And so, I think that in this recent discussion that we're having, and about how just and how fair and how equal is America, then that's where we're going. I haven't forgotten medicine yet. I was reviewing a piece on Imprint. It's a kind of a conservative think tank, and that's somehow I got on their mailing list, and it's been pretty good ever since. I enjoy them because you have to take different divergent points of view. I encourage folks to use to start understanding these artificial intelligence uh, pieces, because that's going to be the wave of the future. I think we need to be ready for it, and kind of wanted to highlight some of the things I thought were interesting this week. Well, ex-President Trump uh, and this one mind speak about white male grievance and white men as victims. Kind of interesting, don't you think? That one of the supposedly richest men in America has a grievance as a white male, and he feels he's being uh, not treated fairly, uh, and that the whole system is rigged against him. Hmm, that's an interesting discussion, and I think we'll take that up. Uh, and I want to really especially give a shout out to Tennessee. Tennessee, the home of the Ku Klux Klan, where Martin Luther King Jr. was murdered. Uh, and we're almost looking at a repeat of history in terms of the framing in the Tennessee Three. Well, really, I think it's the Tennessee Two. It's Mr. Justin Jones, who I think is a Bay Area product out of Hercules. I think he went back to live in the South, which I think is just admirable. He went to a historically black college also, so which is really, really, really great. Staying to his roots, staying to the community. Uh, and I watched this whole thing unfold in the media, and Justin Jones and Justin Pearson, spelled last name Pearson, were members of the Tennessee uh, legislature as representatives of their two communities, voted and duly elected by them. They were honest in their pursuit of the office. There were no flags on their resumes. They didn't say they had education they didn't or met people that didn't met. They just did really hard campaigning and won those seats. And I think what's interesting is that they were removed from office for protesting gun violence on the floor of the Tennessee uh, Senate, House of Representatives. Well, I think that encompasses the First Amendment rights of an individual to protest the government, to protest unfair treatment, and to protest for equality. I think that's well seated in the First Amendment. But what is not seated is institutional and structural racism that would allow these two young men to be removed from their offices because they were, quote unquote, uh, disrespectful to the order of the body and of the office. Hmm. Sounds like America against the British, huh? Sounds like anytime people rise up to protest uh, and to take issue with their government in a peaceful and nonviolent fashion. These young men were peaceful, nonviolent, articulate. That's what impressed me. In the eye of this storm, as they were being removed from this, uh, from a job that they both loved and they had worked hard to get, and they had done it fair and square. So, on that thought, yes, it is three that were supposed to be removed, but two were black and one was a white older female who says that. If it was for the fact that she was a white older female, she wouldn't survive either the removal. So all I can say to the Tennessee representatives is that you could have removed all three of them and it not been an issue. You could have reprimanded all three of them and not been an issue. But to remove two young African American men and then leave a white female is just totally inappropriate. And they're hearing it from the entire country. And it needs to be said that the more things um, change, the more things remain the same. And I want to say it's Easter. And I want to kind of understand that if those that practice Easter, it's a Christian holiday, and understand why people don't practice it because they are not Christian. They are Muslim, they are Buddhist, they are atheist, they are whatever. So enjoy the Easter holiday. And just to kind of like make sure we're clear about that, this comes from CHPT Chat, which is the artificial intelligence unit that I use. It's called GBT Chat, excuse me. And you sign up through Google, and you get to ask all these interesting questions, and that's what I try to do. So Easter is a Christian holiday that celebrates the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead, uh, which it was believed to have occurred on the third day after his crucifixion. It's the most important Christian holiday and celebrated on the first Sunday after the first full moon following the vernal equinox. How could the vernal equinox get involved in that? It's a movement of heavenly bodies, right? Um, It falls between March 22nd and April 25th. Easter is preceded by a period of 40 days of fasting, prayer, and repentance called Lent. And it's also followed by a 50-day period of celebration and joy called Easter season. The Easter holiday also has many secular traditions, and I'm going to talk about those too, associated with it, including the Easter bunny, Easter eggs, and Easter baskets. And that's kind of interesting because some people want Easter baskets. I said, okay, that's kind of interesting. Easter basket. Huh? So the secular part of Easter is always primarily a religious holiday, commemorates the resurrection of Jesus Christ. And however, it has all developed many secular traditions. And here's some of the secular traditions. I just don't want people to confuse to Easter with, Easter eggs, right? So Easter eggs, decorating, high eggs have been a part of Easter celebrations for centuries. Eggs are painted or dyed in bright colors and hidden for children to find. Easter bunny, not Bugs Bunny, Easter Bunny. The Easter Bunny is a proper symbol of Easter in many countries according to legend. Easter Bunny brings Easter eggs and treats to children who have been good. Isn't that a great marketing piece that they do, you know, with the candy? They have a little Easter Bunny, and all seasons they have all these animals that want to be the Easter Bunny, right? Easter baskets. Easter baskets are often filled with candy, small toys, and other treats, and they are given to children on Easter Sunday. How many times did you go to church? Well, I did, and I carried an Easter basket with me. I think I didn't stop till about 10. That's kind of a long time to carry an Easter basket, but I carried one. God. Uh, Easter parades. Many towns and cities hold Easter parades, which are often colorful floats, marching bands, and people in Easter-themed costumes. Spring cleaning. In many cultures, spring cleaning is a traditional way to prepare Easter homes are cleaned and decorated with fresh flowers and other springtime decorations. While these traditions are not necessarily religious in nature, they have become an important part of Easter celebrations in many parts of the world. And I wish to everyone on this weekend and on Sunday a happy and prosperous Easter Sunday. Um, and so I wanted to kind of also bring some discussions to bear fruit about what happened to these two African American men, legislators, Justin Jones and Justin Pearson. Yeah, my last name is spelled Pearson too, Pear. So a pair and son. I always tell people you have a pair, then you have a son, it's Pearson. I thought about the plantation mentality. So I went back to GPT chat and asked me, well, what is the plantation mentality? The term plantation mentality generally refers to a mindset or attitude that perpetuates the values, practices, and power dynamics associated with historical plantation systems in the southern United States. Those two young men, excuse me. I'm just really, as I see them and look at them, they are our future. And they are just as, uh, I saw a lot of pain in their eyes because the promise they knew was a far away. They thought if they just were African American men that came to the body, got elected, and advocated for their communities, that wanted to advocate for less guns in their communities, that they would be okay. Well, like they said, they're not beholden to the gun lobbies, they're not beholden to the NRA, and so that's a problem. That's a problem for two young black men. Two young black men trying to do right. They're not rapping. It's okay if you do rap. They're not driving fast cars. It's okay if you do. But they have a purpose. And their purpose is larger than them. It's about their communities. They should be applauded for that, not castigated. They are the best of the American dream. They are the best of what America has to offer. They are the future of America. You better move aside. I heard a demographic that says that the white population is shrinking. and it's shrinking. And by the time we get in another 10 years, people of color will be the dominant community. So now you can understand why they want to control the court system, why they want to control reproductive rights, why they want to control everything. Because they're fear, and we'll talk about fear of power loss. And that's that plantation mentality. And so it's said that this mentality can manifest in different ways, but often include hierarchical social structure that is characterized by a dominant group, typically white people. People who hold power and privilege over other groups, particularly black people. This mindset also characterizes by a focus on profit and exploitation of labor, as well as disregard for human rights and dignity. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? Sounds familiar that we now are in a society that uh, wants to go backwards, wants us to believe that the leaves of the world and that the Civil War was, I guess, a walk in the park. Nothing like January 6th. That doesn't make sense. And it's said that the plantation mentality also can be seen perpetually of stereotypes and prejudices against marginalized groups, particularly black people, particularly African American people of 1619. Again, when they use black, it's a diaspora. It's African. It's uh, Singalese. It's Ghanaian. It's just not black. Like Africa is just not Africa. It's a continent. So for us, it and for the situation, it included a belief that inherent inferiority of certain groups as well as perpetual of negative stereotypes about their abilities, intelligence, and worth. Overall, the plantation mentality is seen as a harmful and regressive mindset that perpetuates inequality and injustice. It's important to work toward dismantling mentality, promoting values of equality, justice, and respect for all individuals, regardless of race or background or sex or gender or national origin or economics. I just added that. Um, ask ChatGPT. That's what it is. So just I dug up some information again. Ask ChatGPT about equality index for white versus African Americans. Again, I'm Pacific. I'm not talking about all black folks because all black folks haven't had the experience of African Americans in 1619. The the expulsion of those two young African Americans was an example of what was and what continues to go on in America post slavery. This happened to African American legislators toward Reconstruction, the end of Reconstruction. And we'll talk about that, but kind of interesting. Um, and I don't see how far my time goes because I got started about per time 2:20, so I still get a whole hour. So I'm gonna take my hour. So I asked ChatGPT again. So the equality index of white versus African Americans. It says an equality. So what is an equality index? Because we talked about it earlier. Equality index is typically a statistical measure used to evaluate and compare the level of equality across different groups or populations. The specific definition and calculation of equality index can be varied depending on the context and purpose of the index. And so I was watching this program on Comcast, and I guess it's business leaders, and I believe it was the Urban League, but they had done a equality index and used about maybe I think 30 to 40, maybe even 100 factors. Everything from home ownership to you know education to um, all those things that kind of make up the American dream. So again, the specific definition and calculation of equality index can vary depending on the context and purpose of the index. We just want to find out if being white in America at this point in time, African Americans are equal and the same parameters that would constitute a good life for them and longevity. In other words, they live longer, they live longest than African Americans. If things are equal, then that should be the case. So, in terms of comparing African Americans and white Americans, various equality indices could be used to access the level of parity between two groups. For example, an index could measure disparities in income, education, health outcomes, or representations in positions of power. While progress has been made, while progress has been made in addressing historical inequities, there is still significant disparities between African Americans and white Americans in many areas. For example, the data from U.S. Census Bureau shows that in 2020, we're in 2020, the median household income of African American household was 57% of the median for the white household. 57%. They make 100, we make 50%. We have 57%. What does that mean in terms of our spending power? What that means is our ability to buy a home or send our kids to education. If we're only making 50% of the average white person, 50%. That's less. That's a little more than half, if more, if less. Similarly, these are disparities in education attainment, health outcomes, criminal justice involvement. So that's American life. Education attainment, health outcomes, criminal justice involvement. That's why this is not equal. It wasn't supposed to be equal. It wasn't designed to be equal. The Constitution says we're three-fifths of a human being in 1776. That was a compromise. Overall, the question of whether African Americans and white Americans have achieved a level of parity is a complex and multifaceted, and we require nuanced, comprehensive analysis in multiple equality indices. And why I bring this up is that the individual that was on Comcast said that no, we're not equal, no, not even a chance. 57% might be undermining it when you take in all the various factors on our health, on our freedom, on our education, on our children's education, on our ability to for upper mobility. It's just not us anymore. It's this system. And because we talk a lot about mental health, kind of review some of the information on the status of youth mental health post COVID. Again, ask GPT chat, what's going on? How is it looking post COVID? I know I see in my population a lot of depression, a lot of anxiety, a lot of post health issues, brain fog, respiratory problems, you know, a little anger, a little fear about why this is not resolving as quickly as it should or it might, because it's a different kind of virus. And that's why COVID isn't over yet. Um, so COVID-19 says the pandemic had a significant impact on the mental health of young people, including African American youth. I posed the question to my because I'm interested in African Americans. I love everybody, but I have a special love for African Americans. I want to know what's going on because I want us all to be healthy. Um, some of the issues related to youth mental health post COVID that may be particularly concerned for African American youth included increasing stress and anxiety. Could you imagine that? That are already a traumatized community, already a stressed out, anxious community, post COVID is more so. How could that be? Very easily. Social determinants, food, clothing, and shelter. The hostility of an environment that says that you don't belong, that you don't exist, that you don't matter. That's how it could get worse. So increased stress and anxiety. The pandemic has caused significant stress and anxiety for many young people. And that's, I see it all. In the families, particularly families with special needs, particularly the LGBT community, particularly. That's who we're not reaching. And we need to have a special understanding of that, as opposed to limiting care and saying that they do not exist, and saying that you don't want to deal with them, and saying that making laws against them. I'm really interested in there's a real good correlation between the ability of a woman to have abortion in rural OBGYN care. It's making it onerous for those clinicians to stay in those states and practice. Fear of being arrested, fear of having a license taken. They work that hard to do something and told they can't do it. So they're choosing to leave the state. One of the ill effects of abortion or the push to eliminate or limit abortions will be less OBGYN care, and because of the insurance. So a lot of families in these particular areas are going to, as clinicians, OBGYN clinicians, are going to leave those areas, and guess what? The care of the entire state suffers that. Be careful what you wish for, you'll get it. So what's going to happen? They're going to force you to stay in the state and practice if you don't want to stay there. They're going to track you to see if you go in. What's next? African American youth may be particularly vulnerable to stresses of stress and anxiety. These stresses may likely have experienced financial insecurity, loss of employment or income, the social determinants. We talked about that, or any stress related to systemic inequalities. So the mere fact that African Americans have to deal with the yoke of oppression equates into not only their poor health and their poor mental health, but the poor health and mental health of their children. And in my case, the loss of my grandchild, Jamie. Social isolation and loneliness, social distancing measures, and lockdowns have led to increased social isolation and loneliness for many young people. And what I've seen now, again, is body image, substance abuse, high risk sex, depression, suicidal tendency, suicide ideation, thoughts of hurting, harming themselves. And one of my famous lines in my clinic practice now is a safety plan. That you agree not to do this without talking to me first. That you will agree to, if you decide to hurt or harm yourself, you go to the ER. And I have to document that in the chart too. I have to see the person back sooner. So, yeah, it's a big deal. And so isolation and loneliness can have a negative impact on mental health, of course. African American youth may be at greater risk of social isolation as they have more likely to live in areas with limited social support networks or have limited access to technology that can facilitate social connection. TikTok. So, this big thing about TikTok, it should be a big thing about how children communicate on social media and how can we help them make healthy choices. Because adults haven't been making that many healthy choices. How you expect the kids to make healthy choices? We just have such a narrow focus, so myopic, tunnel vision. And trauma. The pandemic and its associated stresses may have caused exacerbated issues with trauma for many young people, intergenerational as well. Trauma is a trigger. You have the trauma, and then you have the network, the physiology, the biology in place to be triggered by a trauma again. Now, what I think is important is that it doesn't take a whole bunch of trauma. It just takes the right trauma and the right person for them to start having mental, social, financial issues in their world because of the trauma, a dysfunctionality, a fear. Such as Africans in America. When we talk about the Ku Klux Klan, we talk about a group of individuals that tried to instill fear by violence and lynching. Not just the Ku Klux Klan. This was the culture of the country. There was no North and South. If you go to California and you were a slave and they found out you were a slave, they sent you back quicker. That's what the reparation paper talks about. Redlining quicker. Understand the history before you say who deserves what. Byron Rumford advocated for housing so that everyone could have affordable housing. That's his legacy. Isn't it a shame that African Americans are the most likely unhoused and the most likely homeless? And now that homelessness is a problem, we look at why cities didn't create the capacity in the first place because they wanted to keep certain people out. We're about, I'd say we're about 20 years behind housing capacity and the laws that go with it because it's always not in my backyard. The problem with affordable housing isn't that we don't need it, isn't that the funds aren't available, it's that communities don't want it there. But they want the cheap worker, want the person to cut their lawn or watch their kids or do whatever. And so, trauma. African American youth may be higher risk of trauma related to systemic racism, such as experiencing discrimination or witnessing police violence. It's always kind of interesting that these behaviors reverberate through our community and we are stuck with dealing with them because of fear, because of privilege. And I also found in COVID there was a disruption of just normal routines and activities. The pandemic disrupted many routines and activities that are important to young people's mental health. Band, athletics, glee club, chess club, cheerleaders, social gatherings, balls, senior ball, your junior ball, graduation. A lot of those folks, a lot of kids, a lot of families, a lot of grandpas miss that because of COVID. It's a period I think that we'll never be able to recapture, and will always have an indelible scar on the psyches of the folks that had to go through it, including myself as a clinician. I say that because when I first started practicing in 1982, then the first disease that I came in contact with was HIV. It was called acquired immune deficiency. It was called acquired immune deficiency syndrome, which ended up being HIV, which means /AIDS. Didn't know how people got exposed. We thought it was just a white male disease and it was only going to happen in their community and they had to deal with it. And then it became everybody in the communities. And then they found a solution for it. And I think that we always have to kind of keep our guard up a little bit because COVID's not over yet. And I think it's really important in the summation that health professionals and educators and support system be aware that the issues that provide targeted support to African American youth and other young people also who may be experiencing mental health challenges. The first thing is to realize it could be a problem and then see what solutions it could be. Now, we shoot ourselves in the foot when we don't have enough pediatric behavioral health providers and don't want to expand that framework so that we can address mental health issues. I'm surprised at the number of clinicians that do not like to address mental health issues. It's almost quintessential now. Whatever a person may have, they're going to have anxiety, depression, trauma issue with it, PTSD. So we're dealing in a world of trauma. And so we have to manage that. But the whole population, I believe, has been in a war. And we're just coming out of the war, but we're still there. We're still fighting. I think COVID's killing something like 200 people a month. Still. It's number 3 killer last year. Still. Outside of heart disease and cancer. And again, this issue of grievance. I talked to ex-President Trump and the one mind speak of white male grievance and the object of white men being seen as victims. And what's the basis for that mindset? Well, back to Chat GPT. The idea and concept of white male grievance refers to the belief that held by some white men that they are unfairly discriminated against or disadvantaged in society because of their race and gender. Period. Now, what I say to that is, you run everything, you own everything, you decide who comes and who goes, you decide who gets in school, who doesn't get in school, you decide who gets the jobs, who doesn't get the job. So, where's the disadvantage? What's not fair? I don't understand it. This belief is too often rooted in a sense of entitlement and a perception that they are losing their traditional status and power in the society. Well, they are. It says in the case of former President Trump, his rhetoric often played into these beliefs by painting white men as victims of political correctness and multiculturalism. This narrative can be harmful as it perpetuates a sense of victimhood and resentment among some members of society and can contribute to polarization and division, as you can just see I think that any African American, and I know this is Believe Radio, it's a gospel station radio. I think any African American in any position that paid $136,000 to a prostitute would have an issue. He'd have to have an issue. And I think what allows someone to have that amount of money and spend it on, I guess maybe one night or a couple. There was another woman too, but wow. So what's the problem? You got caught? Well, pay the fine. So what? But claims grievance that he's being singled out. In New York, that's illegal in terms of campaign financing laws. And I think the district attorney, um, who's an African American man, would have not brought a case that he couldn't win because all eyes are on him. He knew that from Jump Street when he did this. He had to. It's not ego that's driving him. He's going to get a conviction. So it's important to note that the idea of white male grievance is controversial and not universally accepted, with many arguing that white men continue to hold disproportionate power and privilege in society, and that claims of discrimination are unfounded. It's essential to have honest and nuanced discussions about these issues to foster greater understanding and promote a more inclusive society for all. White privilege. White entitlement. I'm 67. I've lived by it. I don't personalize anything, but I know there's jobs that I didn't get. I know there's uh, opportunities that I wasn't invited to because it was easier to not have me enter than to have me enter. And I had to accept that. And as I always tell people, keep it moving. And which brings me to uh, this discussion around these two young African American men. So I asked the question, was this kind of like, has this ever happened before? Or what makes this so unique? It says, the expulsion of African American Representatives Jones and Pearson from their positions in the Tennessee legislature has historic social and political implications. It highlights the ongoing struggles for racial equality and justice in the United States, particularly in the realm of politics and governance. From a historical perspective, the expulsion of these two representatives is reminiscent of challenges faced by African Americans during the Reconstruction era in the late 1800s. During this period, African Americans gained significant political representation, but their positions were often challenged, undermined by white supremacist forces. I'll read that again, but their positions were often challenged and undermined by white supremacist forces. Many black elected officials were subject to violence, intimidation, discrimination, and some even expelled from their positions in government. Nothing new. Nothing's changed. The more things change, the more they remain the same. And so I bring this up because some of the discussions are being had that one of the representatives, I don't know which one, said that told them to go ahead on and expel them because they would get more political push out of this. Well, what if you hadn't expelled them? What if it was just a conversation? But he took it to heart. So he had to accept being expelled. Not thinking that him protesting for his district and using what he believed is the protection of the First Amendment rights, uh, would have given him a shield. Like now, like then, no, it didn't. It says that many black elected officials were subjected to violence, intimidation, discrimination, and some were even expelled from their positions in government. Socially, the expulsion of Jones and Pearson sends a message that African Americans continue to face barriers to fully politically participate in representation. It raises questions about the extent in which African Americans are truly equal participants in the American democracy and whether their voices are being heard and valued in the political process. Politically, the expulsion of these representatives highlights the ongoing struggle for power and representation in American politics. It underscores the importance of diverse representation and the need to address systemic barriers to political participation for historically marginalized groups. The expulsion of Jones and Pearson has significant historical, social, and political implications and serves as a reminder of the ongoing struggle for racial equality and justice in the United States. It highlights the need for continued efforts to promote diversity and inclusion in American politics and governance. That's what I think about those two young men being expelled from the Tennessee legislature. It's appalling. It's disrespectful. It's un-American. It's so un-American. And those that promote that type of behavior aren't Americans. They're un-American. The very basis for this country was protest. To protest against British control of a monarchy. The tea being thrown to the Boston Harbor, the Boston Tea Party. I remember this American history was a discussion around protest. So I guess if we woke, we don't need to know that America was built on protest. This is all about being woke, right? They want you unwoke. And if you're unwoke, you can't do nothing. The last piece, and again, I started a little bit late, so they're going to give me some more time. I appreciate that. Etymology and Believe Radio. Ms. Howard, thank you very much. Really excited again about my website. This is Believe Radio, 24-hour inspirational gospel music radio station. Up for award, I think. Looking at for an award for I got to make sure we get that information out so you guys can vote for us so we can get us some medal. Community radio is our new megaphone. Let's use it. Let's use it wisely. Let's use it fairly and honestly and ethically. That's what I'm going to do. So I asked the question. I said, is there a correlation between decreasing access of rural OBGYN care and new abortion laws in the overturn of Roe v. Wade? And what it says, this is a complex issue. I think so too. It says that one factor is an increasing number of state level abortion restrictions being enacted in recent years, particularly in conservative leaning states. These restrictions often place burdensome requirements on abortion providing facilities, such as mandatory waiting periods, targeted regulations of abortion providers, TRAP laws, and restrictions on medication abortion, which is what just happened over there on Friday. A judge in Texas has stated, well, it's two competing rulings. and we'll see how this plays out. One says to restrict the um, use of a quote unquote this abortion pill because the FDA didn't realize what it was doing. So, and this has been proven medicine for the last 20 years and a safety profile on this particular issue. So, I don't know what he's reading. I don't know what he understands, but the data and the information doesn't show it out. And then in the opposite issue, we have a judge that has said that in the 12 states that petition him, they cannot mess with those medicines. So, guess what? This is going to end up in the Supreme Court. In a Trump backed court, let's see how it plays out. It just turned over uh, one of the major rights to have abortions laws. So what's next? That's why they want to have the courts in their back pocket. That's why Trump didn't say anything and McConnell didn't say anything as they push these judges through. Because now we have not by the people, but by legislation. They want to create an environment where they take over everything. They don't have the numbers, but they can make it so they're taking it over. Kind of Matrix-like to me. Kind of Big Brother-ish like to me. Kind of un-American to me, anyway. These restrictions often place burdensome requirements on abortion providers and facilities. These restrictions can make it difficult for providers to stay in business and can force clinics to close, particularly in rural areas where there are fewer providers to begin with. That's how OBGYN care in rural areas and the enactment of those abortion laws in these red states is driving these providers out. Thus, the big picture is lowering the quality of care for all women in those states. It has to. It just has to. So no providers are going to take on those tasks because they don't want to be sued. And they may consider suing because they don't want their practices limited. They don't want to be subject to, litigation for doing their job, for what they went to train in school, for what they love. Another factor is the decreasing availability of obstetric and gynecological care in rural areas. Many rural hospitals and clinics have closed in recent years due to financial pressures, leaving women with limited access to healthcare services in general, including prenatal and family planning. This lack of access can make it difficult for women to receive necessary reproductive health care, including abortions. Now, think about this. African American women have the highest infant mortality rate, highest stillbirth rate, highest death in pregnancy. That's been going on since I've been practicing. I've been practicing since 1981/82. And now you limit access. You're really trying to kill women. Or making them have children they can't have or can't afford or don't want to care for. Which is even worse. And then you put them into an orphanage or you adopt them. Where's that system? In this conversation around having children is how to take care of them after you have them. It's easy to have a child, harder to take care of them. Their health care, their clothing, their food, their shelter, their emotional and psychological well being. That's a race you want to run. And everybody isn't prepared to do that. Why make them? Why make young women? Why saddle young women with that burden? It's unfair. It's myopic. It it entitles male white privilege to say, I can tell you what to do with your body. You have no rights to your body. Slavery. The slave had no rights to his self-determination or her self-determination. Taken together, these factors create a difficult environment for women seeking abortions, particularly in those living in rural areas. They can force women to travel long distances to access abortion services or forego care altogether, which can have serious health consequences. In terms of overturning Roe versus Wade, the increasing access to rural OBGYN care and an increasing number of state level abortion restrictions can make it easier for conservative Supreme Court justices to uphold or even expand state abortion restrictions, which could ultimately lead to the overturning of Roe v. Wade. And because they gave me the time, one more piece. I thought it was important to ask about the role of judges, and because I wanted to understand individuals can just make flip our lives in society at a dime. Well, how we get here? Um, so the role of judges is to ensure that law is applied fairly and consistently, and to protect individual rights and liberties. To protect individual rights and liberties. So the right to have an abortion, or a right for a woman to determine her what she does with her body, is what a judge should help that person determine, not take away their rights. They are tasked with interpreting the law and making decisions based on the facts of a case and the relevant legal precedent. Understand, this is a white male culture for the most part. So we're getting decisions that reflect white male culture unless they are applying the law fairly and consistently, and they are to protect the individual rights and liberties. If they're not doing that, then they're ruling on a personal level, and they have no business being a judge. Judges are appointed or elected to their positions depending on the jurisdiction and are typically required to have extensive legal expertise and training. They are expected to be impartial and objective in their decision making and to avoid any conflicts of interest or bias. So, how does the judge make a discussion that a abortion pill that has been in practice for almost 20 years plus, approved by FDA, now no longer is a drug that should be used by women without any study or information to the contrary? Again, they are expected to be impartial and objective in their decision making and to avoid any conflict of interest or bias. Making decisions, judges typically rely on legal precedent and the interpretation of statutes and constitutional provisions. That's not happening now. We have reactionary judges now. This is something that the Republican Party said they didn't want. They didn't want reactionary judges. They said, "Do not interpret the law. Do not interpret the law. Read the law as the law." Now, here's a discussion on reading the law and the Constitution. We're in 2023. I don't think the founding fathers knew about email or smartphones or laptop computers or jetpacks or R19s or any of that. Because certainly they would have made some decisions. And so what they said about the Constitution, that it should be a living document. The justices like Clarence Thomas and Scalia don't want a living document because it doesn't serve their purpose. In the case of Judge Thomas, he says he can take trips and fly around. He ain't got to tell nobody because who you beholden to? That's the secret. It says when making decisions, judges typically rely on legal precedent and interpretation of statutes and constitutional provisions. They consider arguments presented by both sides in a case, well as any relevant evidence of testimony. Judges may also consult legal experts to conduct their own research or in their decision-making process. Ultimately, judges make decisions based on their interpretation of the law and the facts of the case. Their decisions can be appealed to higher courts and be overturned if a higher court finds that the judge misapplied the law and made an error in judgment. So we will see about this. I want to thank you for listening. Uh, I want to thank my co-host, Miss Barbara Howard, Eyes Conscious Soul. And I want to thank Curtis for helping me get up and running because I didn't know how to get it done. Because when you don't know something, you have to ask somebody sometimes. They say if you don't know, better ask somebody. Got to. Thanks, Curtis. Um, please check out my website. I'm excited about it. I think that it's again HT, again H as in Henry, T as in Tom, T as in Tom, P as in Paul, S, and then you put the like two dots and you go slash slash, and then www.educationisthebestmedicine.com. Just the way it's spelled. You got to put the HTTPS. That's the universal. It's a universal code to get in and hit my website, and you'll pop up. And I think Miss Howard is on there as the front page this month. So check it out. Again, I want to thank you for. Oh yeah, Marcus Penn's in there, or Dr. Penn. Um, Interesting stuff, and I'm gonna start doing a editors, a founders piece. Gonna have do some things called in the first person. Where I'm gonna have people come in and talk in the first person about themselves in the first person always, and hopefully gonna expand the platform to Zoom and have some guests come in and talk with us. I want to thank you for uh, sharing some time with me. I want to thank you for bringing light to a very dark world. If visions are seeing things you haven't seen, and all you are visionaries, and I want to thank you for your help. Have a great week. Happy Easter to everyone. Um, and be peaceful. Thank you.